Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to PwC's Risk and Regulation News channel, and welcome back to our second video in our new series of deep dive videos on the EBA stress test 2025. And like always, I have a guest here with me, a real expert on EBA stress testing and RWA calculation. Stefan, how are you?
Very good, Martin. Glad to be here once again. And as you just said, glad to have two of my favorite topics, the CRR3 and the EBA stress test, combined in one video. I'm really looking forward to this session.
Yeah, it's going to be a great video. Stefan, as we heard already in our first episode on the EBA stress test deep dive, one of the biggest challenge for the bank will be the calculation of stressed RWA. Can you explain me and our viewers why is that such a big challenge?
Yeah, first of all, it's true to the EBA's methodology that any changes to the regulatory framework that are in place, that are agreed upon before the cut-off date, i.e. end of 2024, need to be taken into account as part of the stress test. And in this year, this obviously means that the CRR3 rules, which have been published in the official journal back in June, now will also need to be taken into account in the EBA's stress test. And that in turn means, as you rightly pointed out, that banks will need to be able to calculate stressed risk-weighted assets and capital requirements according to the CRR3 rules. Quite interestingly, within days literally, the EBA announced that the first CRR3 compliant CoRep reporting was postponed to give the banks more time for implementation, and then asked banks to produce the same CRR3 numbers as part of the stress test already by the end of 2024 and submit them to the supervisor in spring 2025. And I'm quite sure that this will be a huge challenge for most banks who had already started to relax because they thought they had time until summer of 2025 to do this reporting.
Wow, please let me repeat that because that is really incredible. That means the first reporting date as of the end of March must be, like, the reports have to be handed in June 2025 because it's such a big challenge for the banks to calculate CRR3 RWA. But on the other hand, banks have to calculate RWA as in a stressed way already much earlier according to CRR3. That sounds
Indeed
like really a big challenge, and I think it's worth to dig a little bit deeper into this challenge. Stefan, please. RWA calculation in the stress test is necessary for credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. Are these changes in the rules relevant for all types of risks?
Yes, they are. No good news here. You have to be able to calculate the CRR3 approaches for all of the risk types. Credit risk, both standardized and IRB approach, market risk, operational risk, the CVA risk capital charge, and of course the output floor.
Wow, that is a lot. Maybe we speak a little bit more in detail about credit risk. You said already that banks have to calculate a new standardized approach for credit risk, and the IRB approach is going to change also significantly. Maybe regarding the standardized approach, what are the most important changes in the CR3 that are also relevant and have an impact on the stress test results?
Well, we could literally spend a lot of time on going through the CRR3 changes to try and summarize this. I think the most important changes from the CRR3 are obviously the treatment of real estate collateral, the treatment of unrated counterparts, and there is big risk exposure amount impact from the treatment of participations or equity risk and subordinated debt, all of which obviously feeds into the stress test.
Okay. And when we speak about the internal models like the IRB approach, internal rating-based approach, what are there the biggest changes in the CRR3 that have also impact on the stress test results?
First of all, it's the change to the scope of application of the IRB approach. It means that within the stress test already, you can no longer apply IRB approaches or advanced IRB approaches to institutions or large corporates. You have to include the input floors into the calculation of IRB risk weights, and you have obviously the output floor, which means that you need to be able to recalculate your risk-weighted assets for the IRB portfolios also using the standardized approach.
Yeah, especially and as a bank that is used to the IB approach, the standardized approach is completely new to you, and then to calculate the simulated RWA, wow, that's going to be a challenge. If we move to the next risk category to market,
Maybe before
yes,
we
please.
do that, I would like to add some more considerations on credit risk. So when we say that you need to be able to calculate risk-weighted assets according to the CRR3 rules, that means that first of all you have to do a restatement of the 2024 values. And that means not only end of 2024, but also beginning of 2024, so that you can calculate both the default and loss rates for 2024 based on the new risk exposure classes provided by CRR3. So the breakdown of positions, in particular in the standardized approach, will be much more granular than under the CRR2. And as I said, you need to be able to produce these numbers and this breakdown also for data as of January 2024 and not only December 2024. The second important change, in my opinion, is the treatment of the transitional provisions within credit risk, because some of these transitional provisions impact directly the risk-weighted assets and are to be shown in the credit risk templates, while other transitional provisions are shown only in the capital templates. So you need to make sure that you have a consistent treatment of the impact of the transitional provisions and not count them twice or not at all. And finally, one other big challenge with regards to credit risk is that the restatement according to the CRR3 numbers is a bit inconsistent across templates. Whereas in the RWA templates, where you show risk-weighted assets, you have to show actual 2024, restated 2024, and then the stressed periods. There are other templates, like the scenario template, which start directly with the restated CRR3 numbers. So you also have to make sure that you are able to perform these breakdowns both for risk-weighted assets calculation, but also for the calculation of provisions. And it's not just limited to the regulatory numbers.
Oh, that does not only sound like a real technical, content-driven challenge, it's also an IT challenge to make all these calculations on the different points in time. Wow, that's really a lot. But now maybe moving to the next category, to market risk. What are there the biggest changes of CR3 that are relevant for the stress test?
Well, the EBA obviously takes into account that FRTB has been postponed by 1 year to 2026. However, for the calculation of the output floor, banks are still asked to use the alternative standardized approach, similar to what has been proposed by the Commission for the postponement of FRTB, and thereby relying obviously on numbers that banks already have to report as part of the C91 CoRep reporting. Still, this is quite some change in methodology also for market risk. Not comparable to credit risk in the extent of new calculation that needs to be performed, but still also with an impact on the outcome of the stress test.
Yeah, even when the calculations are already very complicated, but also the requirement on how to calculate what, that is already a challenge, because you have to calculate your RWA according to the old CRR for standardized approach and for the internal model as applicable. But on the other hand, for the floor calculations, you now have to calculate the new standardized approach according to FRTB, simply to understand that when you have to calculate what, that is already a huge challenge. There's one subcategory for market risk that might be quite interesting, and that is the CVA risk capital charge. I heard that there are some special rules that must be considered.
Well, for the CVA risk capital charge, you also, of course, have to apply the new CRR3 approaches to calculate the stressed capital requirements for the stress test. So banks will have to rely on their planned implementation of the basic or standardized CVA calculation approaches.
So even when, in general, for market risk, the old approaches have to be applied. For CVA risk capital charge, which is a subcategory of market risk, the new CR3 approaches have to be applied. Ooh, that's quite confusing, I would say. Last risk category, operational risk. I heard that all existing approaches are replaced by one standardized approach. Can you give us more insights on that?
Yes, that is indeed the case. So CRR3 allows banks only one approach to calculate op risk capital requirements, and obviously consistent to what I've said before, this means that also in the stress test you will need to apply the new standardized approach for the calculation of op risk capital requirements. This may be good or bad news depending on the bank at which we look. If banks that have so far used the AMA approach, obviously they will have a higher starting point because the standardized approach produces higher RWA numbers as compared to the AMA. However, the stressed impact obviously is nil in this case because the value as of end of 2024 will simply be kept constant and there will be no stressed impact on risk-weighted assets.
Okay, so looking to all these changes coming from the CR3 on credit risk, market risk and operational risk, what would be your advice to our clients, to all the banks in the EU and especially also all the ECB supervised banks? How should they prepare? What can they do for being not too stressed in the beginning of 2025?
First of all, I believe they will be stressed. I've never seen an EBA stress test that was not stress to the bank and also to the bank personnel. But of course, you can prepare. By now, you have the draft methodology, you have the draft template, so now that there is no reason not to start with your preparation. Get in touch with your CRR3 projects. I believe in many banks, these are quite similar people or similar departments working on both topics. So align yourself with your counterparts in the CRR3 projects. Try to find out what they can do right now, what they plan to be able to do by the end of the year, and start preparing also your software tools, your methodology to include all the CRR3 numbers within your stress test calculation engines to be able to produce the numbers in time for the supervisors. The EBA, kind as it is, has provided a bit of a longer period for the submission of the first stress test data, so for the ADC, simply to take into account that banks will need more time to calculate CRR3 numbers, which is an important learning back from 2018 and the first time application of IFRS 9, where it took a bit of pressure from the industry before the EBA relented and gave the banks more time to produce IFRS 9 numbers for the stress test before they were required for the financial statements.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Stefan. Insightful as always, ladies and gentlemen. There are a lot of challenges regarding the stressed RWA calculation in the stress test 2025. If you need any additional support or if you have further questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us or to your local EBA, ECB, PwC expert. The contact details and our webpage are included in the comments of this video, so please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you very much and see you soon. Bye.